I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker. John Wolpert will be speaking today. He's the founder of Baseline. He'll be sharing an overview of Baseline Protocol, which enables enterprise use of Mainnet Ethereum. John, welcome. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Can you hear and see me? Oh, you can't see me yet.
You are all good, John.
Hey, it's great to see everybody. It's been quite a year for the Baseline Protocol team. I'm going to tell you about that and set it in some context. Would love to have some questions. No slides today. I'll just be talking to you. Baseline Protocol is not, I'm going to start with what I always say to everybody. Baseline Protocol is not a coin, a token, a scheme, a platform, a product. It is simply a technique that is under standards development, that is under the OASIS body for standards development, which is a venerable standards organization going back 40, 50 years, I guess, behind SGML and AMQP and MQTT and all sorts of standards. The Baseline Protocol is a standard for using a public mainnet like Ethereum as a common frame of reference for integrating and effectively enforcing the consistency between records held in different traditional systems of record like SAP, Microsoft Dynamics or Mongo or anything like that. And the problem that solves is right now, 30% of any large companies, even the largest of companies like a Boeing, 30%, as many as 30% of the companies that work with them, suppliers and others, don't do enough volume or aren't big enough or have systems that warrant setting up a siloed, dedicated integration hub or bus in order to maintain consistency between company A's system of record and company B's. So what's involved in that, distributed systems 101 is the need to have a common frame of reference. Either you're going to primary one system to the other, and most security officers don't love that option. It also gives a lot of control to the primary company. Or you can set up an integration bus and have this common frame of reference between you. But now we have silos upon silos upon silos. And what does an integration bus do? Well, one of the things it does, the simplest thing, is effectively ordering and hash management. That is, I need a way for my record in my database to be verifiably identical to your record in your database. Say my purchase order is, I'm going to send you a purchase order. I'm going to message you that by a peer-to-peer messenger. And now we need a way of breaking the two generals problem of, knowing that we've completed the circuit without continuously pinging and hacking. And then we need to be able to say, yep, that proof over there is proof not of existence, but of consistency. We are certain to have this, and neither of us can say that we didn't get the memo or that we fat fingered the entry or something like that. That proves that we at one point in time were on the same page without having to resort to what you would see in a traditional or what we've been doing in enterprise blockchain. And for some of you may know, I helped build this thing called Hyperledger Fabric, and then I kind of saw the light and said, public blockchain is kind of where I want to go. And the reason is I think blockchains, all kinds of blockchains, are more or less terrible databases. And that was sort of the thought we had when we started doing enterprise database or enterprise blockchain was, hey, let's have a single source of truth. Let's put our data collectively on a shared system. And when you think about that for more than 10 minutes, it should have been obvious to us 5 years ago. Okay, now I have my internal sensitive data on a shared threat surface that is now bigger, has a higher risk of exposing that information for every company that has a node. So even a private blockchain is kind of all blockchains are sort of digital nudist colonies. A private blockchain is just a digital nudist colony on a private beach. And that's not a terribly good pattern. Blockchains aren't good at compartmentalization, and companies need compartmentalization. They need ACLs, and they need to be able to say, I'm going to share this record with you and not with you, even though we're all in the same supply chain. But then you need to know that the output of what we're doing here has integrity, and that you can do your step later on without worrying about shenanigans. Baselining is a way to do that. You say, okay, we've got this record in common. We also have shared, using zero knowledge circuits, we're able to say that proof is also effectively a key and a key value lookup, and it can enforce workflow integrity and say this purchase order follows from this master service agreement, and it had to have followed the rules of the master service agreement, or it could not have deposited its proof on the mainnet. If all of this sounds incredibly boring, it is. We like to say that with Baseline, boring is the new exciting. After 5 years of enterprise blockchain hyperbole, I have to admit to perpetrating some of it along the way. Now we have something where a CISO, a security officer, a CIO can say, oh, that makes sense. That's not scary, and that's not an inappropriate use of blockchain. I'm still using my SAP. And now we don't have to sell against an SAP. We can say, more blockchain, more baselining means more SAP, means more mainnet. And you'll hear me always talk about the mainnet. I think we're defining the job of the mainnet, and Ethereum is my vote for the most likely candidate to perform the job. A mainnet is a common always on state machine that resists tampering and resists any group from locking you out of valid transactions or tampering with history. That's what a mainnet must do. And Ethereum does a pretty good job of that. And if all you're asking it to do is manage proofs and use those proofs in a clever way that allows you to do ordering and workflows, even ETH1 is it has enough scale to handle a lot of that, and ETH2 will get us all the way there. So that's the nutshell of Baseline. Started between Microsoft, Ernst & Young, and Consensus back in June of last year, and launched officially as an open standard in Oasis. You can go to baseline-protocol.org and get involved. It's an openly governed open source body. Contribution is the only power. You can be you can be a sponsor, and you're not going to buy yourself any votes. The only thing that gets you a vote for anything is contribution. And so please get involved. We have now 700. Last week I had to say, or a few weeks ago I had to say 600. Now it's 700 active participants. And it just keeps growing, company after company after company, big companies, small companies. And it's a really great opportunity for a small company to jump in, make a mark, and become pretty well known pretty quick. And that's been happening a lot. Any questions?
Sorry for all that. I was muted for a second. Hey, John.
Hey.
I just have to comment. Your video setup is very impressive.
Everybody's got to have a hobby. I got a little spendy during COVID.
I mean, it's beautiful. Let's see. Let me check the chat real quick, see if we have any comments coming in. Still waiting on that for a second. Let's see. If you guys have any questions or comments for John, please hit up live.ethonline.org. All right. Question for you. What can non-enterprise devs do with this? Meaning, like, if you don't work at a big corporation, like, how does this serve you? How does this help you?
Okay, well, in fact, what's most exciting to even the big companies right now is being able to have this common, always on integration bus called the mainnet, called Ethereum in this case, and small, tiny companies. So imagine, like, say you're a radish farmer, and this is actually a story, and you get a purchase agreement from your wholesaler, big company. They're using SAP or some monster system, right? Old school. and you don't even know what that is, but you have an iPhone, you can mash a button in so a lot of people are saying now, if you can't at least do an electronic signature, maybe I shouldn't be working with you. Right. I mean, that's the days of needing to do paper are very quickly ending. And so now you don't really know about anything about IT. You've got your iPhone, you get this DocuSign, you mash the button. And then what if right after that, it said, your wholesaler will give you points or benefits, spiffs, if you click here, and for $9.95 a month, you have a system of record that is baselined, so that now that wholesaler is a lot more confident that you have some kind of record keeping that they can be confident in. Right? Just that alone can make a big difference to even a radish farmer. And that, by the way, free idea, go ahead and build that. And let me know if you do, because I'll promote the heck out of it.
Awesome. You hear that, everybody? That was a free idea. I got another question for you, John, coming in from the chat. In your experience, what's the biggest hesitation enterprise users have when thinking about Baseline and thinking about Ethereum?
So say that again. I didn't press the first part.
It's what's your biggest hesitation enterprise users when thinking about Baseline? Like, what are their hesitations? Sorry, I can't think of a synonym for that.
So I used to work for this innovation company 20 years ago, and there was a great line in there. It was called "but the but." Never always bring two buts to an argument or a discussion. And what that means is, scientists, when you try to do brainstorming, and you say, well, you can't just do a brainstorming and say no killer phrases, all the ideas are good. No, scientists know that's not true. I used to work at IBM Research and a lot of scientists. And so what we used to say is you can always say, but that won't work. But then you have to say, but it would if. Even if your second but is crazy. Like one time, this is true story. I was working on something and we were doing that, and somebody said, but that won't work, but it would if gravity was different. And one of us went, wait a minute. And obviously we didn't change gravity, but it led to a pretty good idea. Do that, do that 5 times. You'll have an important idea, like most often. Changed my life, that way of thinking. And in a way, that is the process we followed to get to Baseline. We said, well, here are 10 reasons. And if you go to my Twitter feed, at the top of it, you'll see an article called Common Sense Statement on the Mainnet for Business, I think, something like that. And that came out of an article that we wrote with the EEA Mainnet Working Group. I wrote called 10 Reasons Why I Won't Use the Public Blockchain for Business. And then, of course, the subtitle, and how we can make it so I will. Right. Got it. Yeah. And the 10 reasons are, finality is an issue. If you're using it as a database, you've got scale, finality, custodianship, GDPR issues, privacy issues, confidentiality issues, which are different. Confidentiality is about the business logic. Privacy is about the data. Both things matter, right? If I can decompile that smart contract and it has identifiable attributes that I could use to figure out who you are and what you're doing and who and with whom, it's not okay for business. Sorry. I don't think it's okay for tiny businesses. I mean, if you're dealing with grandma's pension, you're a 3-person company, you've got the same security issues as any giant company. Yeah. Right. We don't need a standard for enterprise Ethereum versus everything else Ethereum. We need a standard for Ethereum, and it needs to work for all of us. And all, the smallest companies or the smallest teams, the most innovative or disruptive teams out there, sooner or later, if they're successful, are going to be the ones that everybody says, oh, they're the bad guys. And I still remember, when Google was two or three people and don't be evil was a thing, right? There's a life cycle to all this. So, they say build security in from the beginning, don't tack it on later. So all of these reasons why you wouldn't use the blockchain, and particularly, they all boil down to thinking of blockchains as databases. Don't put data on blockchains. Don't put the primary business data on blockchains, right? 80% or more of that is sensitive in some way or another. You don't want your competitors or other people knowing about it all the time, even when the people say they want to be transparent. Now, you don't really want transparency. You don't want everybody knowing where all the food is in a supply chain. That's a good way of bad guys finding out ways of doing bad things. You want transparency between counterparties when that's appropriate, and you want to have some control over that. So, but we don't want to keep on building all these silos. So if we can use the mainnet, so that's when we said, but if we were using mainnet effectively as an ordering and hash management tool and a consistency machine where we're saying, where it can say, you're consistent, I don't know what about, and the thing I'm using to tell you that you're consistent looks like noise and sounds like a metronome to anybody, any casual observer of the mainnet, then that's okay. So it'd be, but it would work if we, so in a way, from a business perspective, and I'm not saying this is the only use of Ethereum blockchain. I'm saying that it's kind of like, I wrote an article recently about how the Bose noise canceling, the history of noise canceling headsets relate to the future of the internet. And at the end, the point is there's lots of other uses of compute and silicon lithography than just noise canceling headsets. But it was a nice, satisfying, specific thing you could do the math on and know at what point transistors would be able to cancel noise out of the air in a thousandth of a second. You could do the math on that. You say, well, Moore's law is going to give me, I'm going to be able to do that in 1992 or actually 1998. So, and I'll be able to do it on batteries in 2006, right? So, what is that for blockchain? There's lots of other uses of blockchain. In fact, my use with the baseline, and by the way, I'm not the founder, I'm just a co-founder and I'm the chair of the TSC. And I should say, please get involved. We're having a big summit. Go to baseline-protocol.org, get on the Slack. It's mostly Slack, but we do have Telegram and other things integrated, but a lot of the work gets done on Slack. There's a lot of people in there, very friendly crowd, very kind and welcoming and engaging maintainers, good engineers, good people to know. One of the teams just got a big deal with Coca-Cola, Coke One North America. And because another team just happened to show up, they got in on the deal.
Nice.
So, there's a lot of friendliness here. Come on in. And we're planning a big summit for the 12th and 13th of November that will result in some challenges that we were going to do a big Gitcoin hackathon for 2 weeks in December on with nicely funded bounties.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. I hope everybody caught that. I have another question for you coming from the chat. So what do you think will be the first major use case of Baseline? And kind of along the same lines, what business types are you most excited to see experiment with Baseline?
What business types? Well, I mean, things like purchasing, and if you think about what do businesses do with each other, right? And by the way, if you're not cross business, if you're not multi-party or multi-entity, again, you don't really need blockchain. If you have a boss, if you have a single admin and a CEO maintaining things, you don't need blockchain for anything. If you need a shared system that different departments can say they have ownership of, use Git, right? There's a lot of things you can use, but if when you get between companies, that's when blockchain becomes an important integration hub potentially. And so in those environments, what do we do between companies? We buy stuff from each other and we move stuff between each other, and we have to manage agreements. This before that, what are the gives and gets? What are the quid pro quos? And we need to enshrine those in agreements, some of which, not all, but some of which can be codified into business logic that can be executed by a computer. Not everything. Sometimes the rule is don't be stupid, and that you can't fix that with computers, right? But sometimes you can say, well, this must happen, and I can check that on some kind of system before some other thing happens.
So I've got another question following up to that. So compared to like 3 years ago, what are the biggest things the enterprise blockchain space has learned? Some hard lessons, some good lessons.
Yeah, well, the biggest one is, and many of my colleagues are still there. I'm kind of preaching to the crowd now. don't think of blockchain as databases.
Yep.
If you're not prepared to take your data to Burning Man, don't put it on a blockchain. And I know it sounds a little risque, but I think it's an apt analogy, honestly. It's just a compartmentalization problem becomes really fraught. You can try it. I mean, that's what half the good work that we did in the early days of Fabric. A guy like Gary Singh, who's really good architect, engineer, and coder. Gary Singh ought to get the Turing Award sometimes, I think. And he came up with this great architecture for a semblance of compartmentalization, so that you could control who knows what, but still have it on a blockchain. But it makes for a complex, just factorial nightmare of complexity, and complexity is the enemy of security. So I say, if you're trying to maintain surveillance resistance, a well-managed, potentially air-gapped traditional database. I mean, database, pretty neat invention. In 1970, that was the exciting thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up, relational databases were kind of the thing I worked on in the early 90s, and they're still good. So we should use them. Not everything needs to be a blockchain.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
Think of blockchain more as middleware than as a database, is I think what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Let's see. One more question we got here. So for companies that are onboarding to Baseline, are there any interoperability issues between companies you've seen thus far?
Well, I think this comes along at a good time, because the API economy, which was the last big wave I was involved in, and before that, the object-oriented wave. But I mean, the API economy in particular, you have companies now like MuleSoft and others, and Dell Boomi that do translation, schema management. So the real tricky thing is, how do you verify the identicalness of a record that's on Mongo and SQL, right? So you have to manage that. But there's quite a lot of maturity around that already. And so we can just jack into it and use that. So it's baby steps. It's always baby steps. So, you could have imagined us doing this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but now, it's easy enough that we can do it in production.
Cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, don't let me stop you. What?
No, that was it.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much for chatting with us. I really enjoyed this. If anybody wants to follow your writing or follow just you on the internet at large, what's the best way to do that?
At J Wolpert on Twitter is one, and then the other is I'm the co-vice chair of the Mainnet working group at EEA with Tosh Deans and Hudson Jameson's in there, and we're really we're in the age of convergence. This is a time where all of us need to come together. There's a lot of seriously cool developers that work in a lot of different kinds of companies. And yeah, I remember in the mid 90s, late 90s, there's 2,500 IBMers that got behind Java just because we wanted to, right? And nobody told us we could. We want that for Ethereum. We had to run Java 1 in 97 in Javits Center because there were 30,000 developers that showed up, if I remember the numbers right. Where's our 30,000 developer blockchain conference, right? Yeah. Well, it's because we're not coming together yet.
Yeah.
So we need to do that, and we need to know. I mean, companies. You can not like companies. You can not like enterprises, and I might agree with you in a lot of cases. But at the end of the day, we're all just large groups of mostly humans, and the developers in those companies can be a great ally, and we need to reach out to them.
Awesome. Heard loud and clear.
Yeah. And Twitter is probably the easiest way to find me. And again, baseline-protocol.org. Come and join us, please.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This is great. I'm going to go ahead and switch over, give us a little 5-minute break. We're going to listen to some lo-fi radio, and I'll be back on the chat soon. All right. Thanks, guys.